Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Explore Lakes with New Hampshire Lakes webinar. Tonight, we will be bringing to you Enjoying Lakes While Protecting Wildlife, and we have two experts in the house here tonight to spend the next hour with you. Thank you again for tuning in. I am Andrea Lamoureux, the president of New Hampshire Lakes. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. This session is being recorded. Participants, attendees, you will be muted for the duration of the webinar. You are most welcome to leave your camera on. Just know that if you leave it on, others can see you. And to limit bandwidth, if you're starting to have connectivity issues, you might want to turn off your camera. The experts tell me that helps, but hopefully tonight we'll have a clear signal and smooth sailing. Please, attendees, feel free to submit questions in the chat box at the bottom of the screen and direct your questions, excuse me, to everyone so that everyone can see them. Don't direct them directly to Harry or Lindsay as they'll be busy presenting, but myself and Soren from our team, the New Hampshire Lakes team, will be moderating, keeping an eye on the chat box and answering your questions as we can, but of course saving the toughies for the experts. Tomorrow you will receive an evaluation form from us via email. Please do take just a few minutes to fill it out and let us know what you liked about the presentation, what we could have done better, and topics you'd like to learn about in the future. This is a series that we'll be doing twice a month through the summer and into the fall. So we definitely want to hear what you want to hear about. And for those of you who are new to us, New Hampshire Lakes, we're the only publicly supported nonprofit organization working for all of New Hampshire's lakes, all 1,000 of them, including your favorite lake. And I thank those of you on the call tonight, and I see a handful of you who are our supporters and help us do this important work. And if you aren't yet a supporter, I encourage you to go to our website, nhlakes.org, and find out how you can help support our work. Our mission is to keep New Hampshire's lakes clean and healthy, and we work with partners, promote clean water policies, and really inspire and give the public the tools to take simple actions to keep the lakes that they love clean and healthy. Our programs, we advocate at the state level for rules, laws, policies, programs to help better protect all of our lakes for all of us. We do on-the-ground conservation, if you know us at all. It's through our Lake Host Courtesy Boat Inspection Program, which helps prevent the spread of invasive species. This is our 20th summer, and over the past 19 years, we've inspected over 1.3 million boats and helped boaters prevent the spread of invasive plants and animals. We recently launched a new program called Lake Smart, the Lake Friendly Living Program. And to find out more about these programs, just go to our website, nhlakes.org. And we do outreach, and one form of outreach is meeting with all of you twice a month to bring lake conservation and ecology issues to your kitchen table. And we also go around the state meeting with groups and hopefully soon going to festivals and playing fun games with families and kiddos while they learn about lake ecology. I want to thank Grapponi Automotive Group. They are our presenting sponsor of this entire series. They are a longtime supporter of New Hampshire Lakes, and please do visit them at the intersection of I-89 and I-93 in Bow if you have any car needs. They are really awesome to work with. So tonight, again, I'm Andrea Lamoureux, president of New Hampshire Lakes. I'm accompanied by Soren Denlinger, our business and development assistant here at New Hampshire Lakes, and we'll be again monitoring the chat box. But without any further ado, we have our expert presenters this evening, Lindsay Webb, wildlife educator from the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and Harry Vogel, executive director and senior biologist from the Loon Preservation Committee. So I'm very excited to turn it over to them. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Lindsay is going to kick it off for us.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it. It's just not maximized, I guess.
To make it a little bigger.
Yeah.
Is that a little better?
That is definitely bigger. Good job.
All right, I'm going to jump right in. So throughout the state of New Hampshire, from the seacoast to the bordering states and provinces, and the mountains and lakes in between, there are many places to discover and learn more about our wildlife. Where people are interested in hunting, trapping, and fishing, or if they wish to watch wildlife while recreating, there is never any lack of opportunity in the Granite State. Wildlife like birds, fish, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, or invertebrates can provide you with hours of pleasure as you begin to understand the ways that nature, including us, are connected to one another. There is so much to learn about, to see, and to do. In this presentation, we will discover wild New Hampshire. Spanning the state, you can reach corner to corner in 6 hours or enjoy nature in your own backyard. There are 3 simple rules for becoming an outdoor observer, naturalist, or wildlife watcher. Listen, watch, and wait. Learning how to listen is just a matter of paying attention and becoming familiar with some wildlife sounds. Let's see if you know these sounds. I'm going to play the sound and then show you the wildlife species that makes the sound. Maybe you can make a guess in the chat box. Here we go. Any birders out there? That's the veery. Okay, here's another one. This one might be a little tricky. Is it a duck or a frog? It's the wood frog. Okay, here's one that you probably have never heard of, but maybe. Let's see. That is the porcupine. Probably not one you've heard of very often. They don't make that sound very often. Okay, how about this one? Red squirrel. Okay, how about this one? The spring peeper. And one last one for you. The kingfisher. So before you go out to watch wildlife, it's a great idea to do your homework first. Read as much as you can about the wildlife that interests you. Field guides or books on natural history are good sources. WildNH.com is the New Hampshire Fish and Game website where you can find wildlife species profiles, frog sounds, nature podcast episodes, and a lot more. While doing your research, find out if the animal is more active during the day or night, what shape, size, and color it is, and which special habitat it likes best. All wildlife have basic needs. These needs are food, water, shelter, and space. These basic needs must be found within their home range and is what biologists generally refer to as wildlife habitat. All wildlife have basic needs, but they are all different for each wildlife species. If you understand what those needs are, you're more likely to understand what wildlife might be present in your location. Learn the characteristics of the creature's tracks, scat, scent, and other signs it may leave behind, like gnaw marks, scrapes and rubs, scent mounds, or posts. So starting with the tracks on the top right, we're going to do another little quiz. I'm going to go clockwise, and I'll reveal the wildlife species who left this evidence. So tracking isn't just for when there's snow on the ground. These are raccoon tracks in mud. Wetlands and pond edges are great places to find wildlife tracks. And the next one. Black bear claw marks are often found on beech trees. They climb them to eat the beech nuts. Now, how about this bottom right picture? Who did that? Pileated woodpeckers excavate dead and dying trees looking for insects. The holes they leave behind are usually long and rectangular in shape. And now the bottom left picture. Yellow-bellied sapsuckers drill holes, usually in a line like this, and they'll stick their tongues in to probe for sap. Beavers create a scent mound or a series of scent mounds that act as a fence and warn other dispersing beavers that the area is already occupied. And that top left picture, that is deer scat. Shorelines are particularly important areas for wildlife and therefore can be great places to watch for wildlife. There are many wildlife species that are associated with shoreline habitats, and there is a lot of overlapping habitat along the edges, sometimes called ecotones or transitional areas. Shorelines with extensive mature forests along the shore are critical yet rare habitats in New Hampshire. At the water's edge, native aquatic vegetation, submerged rocks, and boulders and dead trees that have fallen in the water are all features of high-quality shoreline habitat for wildlife. In the field, don't forget to bring your binoculars or a spotting scope so you can view animals better from a distance. Use your guidebooks to help identify wildlife, tracks, and scat. Before you head out, though, be sure you understand where you are and request permission before you go on private property. Wherever you go, leave no litter and do not disturb anything in the environment. And if you are hiking any distance from civilization, be sure to follow the Hike Safe 10 essentials. Most importantly, don't try to approach, feed, or touch animals for your own safety as well as theirs. Never try to interfere with or get between parent animals and their young ones. Be especially careful not to disturb dens, burrows, and nesting sites during the spring and early summer. Try visiting sites at different times of the day or night. Many wildlife species are crepuscular, which means they're most active during dawn and dusk. Different seasons also let you view different wildlife species or different stages within a wildlife species life cycle. Common redpolls are small finches of the Arctic tundra and boreal forests that migrate erratically and occasionally show up in large numbers in New Hampshire, seen at bird feeders or observed foraging on small seeds in trees or in weedy fields. A wetland is a fun place to explore to find amphibians at various stages of their lives. Some wildlife change their behavior or their fur color depending on the seasons. Be patient and alert. Successful wildlife watching means waiting. Find a comfortable hidden spot, stay there as long as you can, and wait for nature to reveal itself to you. First, you might notice the trees and plants that grow there. Learn their names and pay attention to the places where they flourish. They can provide food and shelter for all sorts of wild things, and they are tied to the food web. If you know the food source of wildlife species, you can help connect together this web of life. Next, you might notice crawling and flying insects that are not bothered by you being there. And of course, remember that some invertebrates have some very different and distinctive characteristics depending on their life stage. Generally, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and smaller animals will adjust quickly to your presence. Larger animals may be more shy and will require you to be more patient before they reveal themselves. But don't forget to look up and down. It may take several minutes of quiet for wildlife to become used to your presence. Be curious and slow down. Wildlife will remain in an area if they feel comfortable and unthreatened. So here is a compilation of videos that I took from my wildlife camera and a few cell phone videos over the past year or so. Setting up a wildlife camera is a fun thing to do in all seasons, and I suspect you might be surprised to find out how many wildlife species use your own backyard woods or even your manicured lawn. Feel free to type in the chat when you see a wildlife species that you recognize. And that's the cute little painted turtle. Okay, I just have a few more slides to go. Many wildlife watchers use checklists for recording the species they observe. Keep a notebook or use one of the many apps that are out there. Observations made by amateur naturalists and wildlife watchers can contribute new information about what animals do, where they live, and how they get along with other wildlife. Become a citizen scientist. New Hampshire Fish and Game has several citizen science reporting programs. We are always looking for reptile and amphibian sightings. We also have 2 wild turkey surveys and a couple of other citizen science opportunities, and I encourage you all to learn more and get involved. The Loon Preservation Committee also has some volunteer reporting programs that maybe Harry can mention next. And just a little shout out to Nature Groupie. It's a University of New Hampshire cooperative extension program. It's a great resource for finding citizen science and other outdoor volunteering opportunities. Watching wildlife is a great way to connect and understand how we are all part of the natural world. Being outside is also great for our health and our well-being. So pack your backpack, grab a friend, and discover the wonderful world of wildlife just outside your door. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay. That was so fun. Oh. So Lindsay is going to stay on and through the presentation, through Harry's presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. And if you have any questions at this point too, feel free to type them into the chat, and Lindsay may be able to address them now or address them during the Q&A. So if Lindsay, if you want to, yep. And now Harry, you should be able to share your screen.
All right, so let's see. This one. Great.
Looks good.
Okay, that's good. All right, fantastic. So, great. Thank you, Lindsay. That was great. I love the shout out to loons, and I love those videos. That was fantastic. Very neat to see. Good. So, this evening I want to spend a few minutes just talking about loons, including specific aspects of their anatomy and life history that can put loons at risk from human activities, and also how we can enjoy them while also protecting them and continuing their recovery here in New Hampshire. Let's see. Got. Screen sharing. Why is my screen not advancing though? There we go. Got it. Okay. So let's hope anyway that we've got it now. Good. So loons have come to exemplify the nature experience for a lot of us, and there are good reasons for that. So these are impressive birds, right? One of the first things that people will notice about loons is that they're actually pretty big, and a lot of times people don't notice how large they are, because as we see them floating around out there on the lake, first of all, they're a very dense bodied bird. They're heavy bodied, so they float low in the water. Like an iceberg, most of them is actually below the water where you can't see them. And the other thing is that, often they're just out there in the middle of the lake, and there's nothing really to give us a sense of scale. But they have this striking black and white plumage. They have these blood red eyes. They have these distinctive and far-ranging calls. And my very favorite loon quote, I have to trot this out every time I give a presentation, comes from a British researcher who way back in the 1950s described the nighttime calling of loons as a chorus from all of the devils in hell. And whether you love that sound or it sends chills up and down your spine, you're not likely to forget it or the bird that made it. And then if you add a little downy chick riding up in the back of one of its parents, and you've hooked a fair proportion of your population. So even non-bird watchers know and love their loons, and that makes loons a powerful force for conservation. So many of us think of loons as primitive birds. And when I say primitive, essentially what we're saying is that they've existed in their current form for a long time. And in fact, there are loon-like birds in the fossil record as far back as 80 million years ago. And there are birds that are recognizably like our modern loons that stretch back about 20 or 22 million years in that fossil record. So if you've persisted for that long on this earth, you must have done something right. And loons are actually very well adapted to their existence as a diving and fish-eating bird. And one of those adaptations is very evident from this photo, and that is that the legs of loons are placed far back, right at the very, very back of their body. And that makes loons very efficient swimmers. And unfortunately, it also makes them almost helpless on land. And so loons really can't walk at all. They can just kind of push themselves along on their front, and they can balance for short periods of time if they're creating a nest or rolling eggs on that nest. And that limited mobility is why loon nests are always built right next to the water. That's about all they have in common, though, because nests can range from a pretty elaborate structure like this one of mud and various kinds of vegetation piled up. Or they can be just a shallow scrape in the sand, and they can be built right out in the open like this one. Or they can be quite well hidden. So most of us don't think of that black and white speckling on the back of a loon as camouflage, but if they're nesting under vegetation that allows only dappled sunlight to reach them on the ground, that coloration and that striking coloration can pretty well, to camouflage them and keep them from our sight. So loon's favored nesting site is on an island. We humans also love to nest on islands or otherwise alter areas of natural shoreline. And so that shoreline development and the things that go with shoreline development can displace the loons from their traditional nesting sites. And because those loon nests are always located right next to the water, that leaves those nests at risk from water level rises or even the wake from boats that can swamp loon nests and wash out the eggs. The close approach of boaters can flush an incubating loon from a nest. Now, the good news here is that even if you do happen to flush a loon off the nest, if you leave it the area right away, the chances are pretty good that that loon will hop back on the nest within maybe 20 or 30 minutes of being flushed off of the nest. The danger is that if that happens and it's a really hot day, those eggs can actually cook on the nest. Or if it's a cold and rainy day, they can chill. Either one of those things can kill the embryo that's developing inside of that nest. And it also, exposed eggs like that leave those eggs open to any predators who are working their way along the shoreline or flying overhead and looking for an easy meal. And a lot of animals will take a loon egg if they can get it. So prime suspects number 1 and 2 in New Hampshire as far as mammals are concerned are raccoons and mink. But any of the scavenging animals, and that includes a fox or a bear or a skunk or a possum, those animals will never turn down a loon egg if they can get it. Crows and gulls and eagles will also take loon eggs. Eagles will also take loon chicks, and they've even been known to take an adult loon on occasion. Most of those incidents of eagles taking adult loons have been happening out in the Midwest, where those loons are only about 1/2 to 2/3 the size of our big loons here in the Northeast. But as eagle populations have risen far more quickly than loon populations have in the state, it's becoming a little bit more of a common occurrence in New Hampshire as well. The loons have lived with predators throughout that long history, but today the problem is that some populations of some of those predators have risen to unnaturally high levels because of ready access to human garbage. So 2 eggs are typically laid in that loon nest, and those eggs are laid from 1 to 3 days apart. And after about 27 days, if all has gone well, give or take, we will see this, our first loon chick, and that second chick hatches about a day after that first chick. And once hatched, those loon chicks are not out of danger because these chicks are small and they're dark and they're buoyant. So they're like little corks on the surface of the water. They're too buoyant to dive away from an approaching boat or a jet ski. And so collisions with power boats and jet skis are actually the #1 human-related cause of mortality of loon chicks. But there's another big issue, for these chicks that is less obvious. And so there's an important consequence of that asynchronous hatch, the fact that one chick hatches a day before that second chick. So by the time that second chick hatches and gets into the water, that first chick has been having little minnows stuffed down its gullet all day, and it's got a day's head start on that second chick. And the parents will not play favorites with their loon chicks. They're simply going to feed the first chick that comes to them. But that first chick makes sure that it's the first one that gets there. And the second chick gets fed when that first chick has had its fill. And so boats that get too close to loon families can impede the care and the feeding of these young. So it's a full-time job for 2 adult loons to raise 2 chicks over the course of a field season. The problem is that when these chicks are born, they act as magnets to people, right? And so we all want to get just a little bit closer to these loon families and share in the intimate moment in the life of these loons. The problem is that there comes a point when we are too close to these loons. And instead of caring for and feeding those chicks, the loons stop what they're doing, which is the reason why we wanted to observe them in the first place, and begin to focus their attention on us as a potential predator, as we're invading that personal space. And sometimes, we've had these loon center visitors come into the loon center and say, oh, the loons were dancing for us. And I'm always surprised that people don't recognize that this is a sign of an animal in great distress. So the photographer who took this picture was way too close to this loon. And this display is essentially being done to distract our attention, and the loons at this point are thinking of us as a potential predator, away from its chick or its nest or its mate. And so the problem here is that these loons need to be spending their time and energy feeding those chicks and not displaying for our benefit. And of course, the problem is that the more time that these loons spend watching us and displaying, the more is the time that that second chick is not getting fed. And that can actually lead to the starvation of that second chick, as it just kind of becomes more and more weak and eventually drops away from the family unit. And in severe cases, that can happen with both of the chicks. And so you can have loons on a lake that's full of fish, but they can starve if they're not given the space to be able to do their thing, their loon thing. Another problem, of course, is that loons and other wildlife can become entangled in monofilament line that's simply tossed overboard. Loons have no opposable thumbs, so if they find themselves tangled up in line, their method of trying to remove themselves from that line is to undo that line with their bill. And unfortunately, we found loons that have had their bills entirely wired shut by that monofilament fishing line. And when that happens, these loons can't feed themselves, they can't preen themselves and maintain that watertight and waterproof coating on their feathers. And if we can't get out and catch them and rescue them and remove that line, they can actually die from a combination of starvation and exposure. So a lot of issues, a lot of challenges facing our birds, none bigger than this one. So lead fishing tackle is a huge issue for our loons. And when we talk about a lead-headed fishing jig, so this is simply a lead sinker. For those of you who are not anglers, this is simply a lead sinker with the hook molded right into the sinker. So it's an integral piece of that piece of tackle. So loons can ingest tackle in one of a number of ways. And so one thing about loons is that they have no teeth. It makes all sorts of sense. If you're a flying bird, the last thing that you want is a bunch of heavy calcium objects right at the very front of your body. That's going to make it hard to fly straight and level. It's going to make you nosedive into the ground or into the water. So loons lost those teeth early on in their evolution, along pretty much every other flying bird, and replaced that with a very lightweight keratin bill. But the problem here is that having no teeth, loons can't chew their food. And so after they swallow the fish, they will actually forage along the lake bottom, and they'll look for little pebbles. They'll ingest those pebbles, they'll swallow those, and they'll hold those in the gizzard, the muscular portion of their stomach, and and they'll use those as surrogate teeth to grind up the fish that they have just eaten. That strategy that has worked well for loons for all 20 or 22 million years until the past couple of hundred years, where we have begun to add things to their environment that are about the same size and shape as those little pebbles that they're looking for, but they're poisoning our loons. And those things, of course, are our tiny little lead split shot sinkers. So we used to actually think that that was the largest single source of mortality of loons after eating lead fishing tackle. But we now actually think that there are two other ways that loons can ingest this lead fishing tackle and die that are more common. And one of those is that a typical prey item for a loon is maybe like a 6 or an 8-inch yellow perch. And Lindsay actually had a picture of those, a few of those little yellow perch. But on occasion, loons can actually pursue and capture a larger fish. And when you're beginning to talk about something that's larger than an 8-inch yellow perch, you're starting to talk about a size of fish that could conceivably break an angler's line. And when that fish breaks that line, it's still going to be trailing a length of line and whatever tackle is attached to that. And that fish is going to be a little bit slower than the fish next to it. It's going to be swimming a little bit erratically, and that's the fish that a loon is going to zero in on as an easy meal. And when it gets that fish, it also gets the hook and the line and the sinker or the jig as well. And then finally, if you're fishing, you're trying to catch a fish, but you could actually catch a loon instead, because a loon's instinct is to strike at something if it flashes by in the water. So once it's ingested, if that tackle is lead, the lead in that tackle is abraded by the stones that are already in the gizzard and the stomach acids, and that leads to lead poisoning for these birds. And so the good news here is that if that tackle is made of anything other than lead, those loons are going to be just fine. And there's a huge number of things that we can make tackle out of, right? So there's steel, tin, bismuth, tungsten, stone, rubber, these new composite materials. Any one of those a loon can swallow and it will be totally fine. But the smallest little split shot sinker you can imagine, if it's made out of lead, will kill that bird within 2 to 4 weeks of ingestion. So we're not asking people to stop fishing, but we are saying treat yourself and those loons and other lake wildlife to some new non-toxic, loon-safe, lead-free tackle. And so success, in preserving our loon population really just depends on a couple of things. One is increasing breeding success. And this is where giving those loons a little bit of space, especially loons with chicks and loons on the nest, is all important. And the other is decreasing the mortality of adult loons. And here is where lead is king. So we have found that over 40% of the adult loons that we've found dead on our lakes are in that unfortunate state of mortality because they have swallowed a lead sinker or a lead-headed fishing jig. And that's just to give you an indication of the real magnitude of that. So New Hampshire actually became the first state in the nation to restrict the sale and use of small lead sinkers and lead-headed jigs. And by small, we mean 1 ounce or less. And those are the ones that were most often swallowed by our loons. And this is based on the Loon Preservation Committee's data on loon mortality. And so now the important issue is Grandpa's old tackle box in the dusty corner of the garage that is full of old lead tackle. So we began our lead tackle buyback program in 2018 to give people returning that old lead tackle $10 to buy new loon-safe non-lead tackle. And this has been an incredibly successful program. It's a great partnership between Loon Preservation Committee, New Hampshire Fish and Game, and these tackle shop owners. And so in the 3 years that we've been running this program, we've removed more than 25,000 pieces of lead fishing tackle from use and possibly loss in our lakes. And any one of those pieces of tackle could have killed a loon or other lake wildlife if it had been ingested. But still, there's a lot of tackle that's left out there. So I encourage everybody to go to loonsafe.org to learn more about this program and find participating locations. And we've even sweetened the deal this year because not only will you get $10 by trading in 1 ounce or more of tackle that falls within that restricted weight range, But for the person who turns in the largest amount of tackle at any one of these participating shops, we'll give you $100. And for the person who hands in the second largest amount of tackle, we'll give you $50. And so we are serious about getting this lead tackle, all of it, out of circulation, out of our lakes, and out of our rivers. So, there's still much work to be done, and LPC's work goes far beyond loons and far beyond New Hampshire. So loons are a sentinel of environmental quality. They're an indicator of the health of our aquatic ecosystems. They're scientifically important, and they have this wide public appeal. And that's, we think, why loons have found themselves as the focal point of so many of these environmental issues. And that means that if we can save loons, then we can save a lot of other species that depend on the same clean water and quiet places. And I like to think that at the same time as we have been working to protect and recover our loon population here in New Hampshire, we've also been working to encourage an environmental ethic. And ultimately, that's going to benefit not just loons, but other wildlife, and even the people and the economy of New Hampshire, because after all, it's a large part of the reason why we have chosen to visit and to live. And so, I hope that the end result of all of our efforts is going to be a bright future for our loons in New Hampshire. And that's the end of my presentation. And I'm hoping that Lindsay and I have a lot of questions, and we can delve more deeply into any of these topics that are of interest to folks. And so let me end the slideshow. And how do I? Good. So I've been successful in ending screen share. Good. Are we back then, Andrea?
Yes, awesome.
Nice.
Thank you, Harry. I have heard Harry present a number of times over the years, and I always say every time I tune in, I learn something new. So thank you.
Well, we're always learning more. Despite their popularity, there's still so much that we don't know about these birds, but we're learning.
Well, while everyone is getting their questions ready for Lindsay and Harry, I have a question, and I'm not sure, if you can answer this right now, but how does it look for our hatching loons this summer so far? Any thoughts on that? Boy. Any predictions?
Yes. So, Andrea, it's a great question. And around this time of year, we start to get those questions, and it's very frustrating to have to kind of say, like, we don't know, right? Because the story is still being written. We still have loons on the nest, and we have a number of loons that have unfortunately failed. And others, we have chicks that are hatching all over the state right now. And so the indications are that so far, at least, that we're going to have an all right year, for loons. What we're always aiming for is at least a half a chick per pair per year. And that's the level of reproductive success that we know we need to maintain to maintain a stable loon population. And of course, we want to do more than that. We want to continue to recover our loon population, but that's the baseline. So at all costs, we want to not fall below that breeding success. If those chicks that are hatching right now, if the loons that are still on nest are successful, if the chicks that have hatched are allowed to, fish and do their thing and get fed and things, then, the hope is that they're going to make it to fledging. And at some point, by August or September, we can look back on this field season and tell everybody what kind of a year it was for you. But right now, the story is still being written.
Awesome. Another question I just wanted to ask is, Harry, if someone sees a loon out there that they think is in distress, what should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Andrea, that's a great question. By all means, give the Loon Preservation Committee a call or go onto our website. We have ways on our website to report these loons, but we also, on our website, we have a number of pages that are devoted to regular loon activity. So every once in a while, loons can go through this a bout of very vigorous preening. And sometimes we'll get a call and say, well, this loon seems to be in distress. It looks like it's trying to take off, but not able to. And a lot of times what we'll do is direct people to our website, and to the natural history section and ask them to, if it looks like this is what's happening, because we have some clips of that as well. And then to just keep a watch on them for, 15 or 20 minutes and see if these loons settle down, and go back to normal behavior. Because often it can look like a loon in distress, but it's just kind of a loon being a loon. Now, if you have any concerns about it at all, by all means call us, because if there is an issue, then we want to, the sooner that we know about it, the sooner that we can go out and investigate this, try and capture this bird. And if it is tangled up in monofilament, or if there's anything else wrong with this bird, any kind of sickness or injury, the faster that we can get out there and get to this loon, the better the chances of actually rehabilitating this bird and returning it back to the wild. And so, and we're getting better at that too. You know, we have a network of veterinarians and animal rehabilitators that we work with. It's constantly growing. And we have an ever increasing network of volunteers as well that are calling these things in to the Loon Center. So between all of those things, we are rescuing and successfully treating and releasing more loons into the wild than we ever have before, which is really
Great. Well, awesome. So Soren, my teammate here, do you have any questions from yourself or from our attendees?
I do. I was really intrigued by that pie chart of loon mortality, and that really hit me with the lead tackle. I was wondering what the difference was between two of those categories. One was marked trauma, and one was marked loon trauma.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what the difference was.
Sure. Yeah, and Soren, great question. So, I mean, loons are by their nature territorial birds. And so and at some point, you know, you're going to have, if you have loons that are successful on a territory, they're going to attract the attention of other loons nearby. These could be young birds that are looking to establish a territory of their own. They could be loons that have been kicked out of their territory because they've been on the losing side of a battle of other territorial loons. And they're always prospecting, right? They're always looking for a territory that they can take over and be successful and throw those genes into the next generation. And so we do have violence between loons. If you have a territorial animal, sometimes loons will get into fights, and loons have actually evolved some interesting displays that are meant to convince any intruding loons that, you know, I'm powerful and I'm at the peak of my fitness. Don't tangle with me. If you're looking to take over a territory, keep looking. You know, keep on moving on. And so the first line of defense for a territorial pair of loons is to convince those other loons to keep going. But if the loon doesn't take, you know, if that intruding loon doesn't take that message and thinks that he or she has a shot of taking over that territory, loons can fight. You know, and so actually. We have found loons that we have necropsied that have died of various causes, whether it's lead or, you know, trauma from a boat collision or a jet ski collision and things. And you can actually find that they have holes in the breastplate, in the sternum, from the bills of other loons where they have been attacked and they've actually punched holes through. And many of these are old wounds that have healed over. So it can't be comfortable for these loons, but most of the time they survive. Every once in a while, though, if that bill nicks an aorta, you know, or something of that nature, those loons can breed out. And so we do have loons being killed by other loons, but that is dwarfed as a source of mortality from these various causes of human mortality. And that includes not only lead sinkers and jigs, but collisions from boats and jet skis, monofilament, you know, entanglement, diseases like avian malaria and aspergillosis and things of that nature. You know, eagle attacks and things of that nature. So it's a tough life for these loons. But the interesting thing is that I'm sure that loons could deal with all of these natural causes of mortality if we remove that overlying source of all of these human causes of mortality that they also have to deal with in addition to those natural causes.
Great, thank you. I have a question from Eileen here, which is that if you rescue a loon, do you do any tagging to it for tracking later on?
Yes, yeah, boy, another great question. And yes, when we can safely do that, and we will actually put bands on these loons. Every loon that we band gets an aluminum Fish and Wildlife Service band, and every one of those bands has a unique serial number on it. So you can think about that as a social security number of a loon. But in addition to that silver band, we put colored leg bands on these, and every loon gets a combination then of two bands on each leg, and every one of those combinations is unique. So there's only going to be one loon anywhere in New Hampshire or anywhere in North America, for that matter, that has, say, a silver over orange on the left leg and a yellow stripe or a green dot on the right leg. And when we see that bird again, we can follow that bird over its lifetime. And the really neat thing is that as time has gone on, we've been able to document these loons that we've rescued and successfully returned to the wild, coming back, in subsequent years and mating and raising chicks of their own. One of our best success stories, and I forget now which lake this is on, but we had a male loon that we actually picked up in the very early stages of lead poisoning. And we were able to take that loon to a veterinarian and did kind of a lavage. So we essentially put water into its stomach and flushed out all of those stomach contents. We're able to flush out that lead sinker, gave it a shot, of a chelating agent to bind up the lead that was already in its system, and then banded it and let it go. And one of the big questions is, would a loon, that was showing even a mild case of lead poisoning, as that loon was, would it survive? Would it come back to breed again? And that particular loon has come back, and in the 5 or 6 years since we rescued that loon, I believe it's raised 8 chicks on our lakes in New Hampshire. So that's one of the success stories. Sadly, that's still lead poisoning is a tough one, and typically by the time that bird is sick enough, that we can catch it, if it swallowed a lead object, the damage has been done and it's too far gone. And most often the only recourse for that bird is humane euthanasia. So it's another reason why lead is just it's a bad actor on our lakes.
Great. We have one other question, and Lindsay, you might be able to answer this. Luann says she's been noticing more black bear sightings at Newfound Lake near Wellington State Park over the years. They've been walking on the beach. What would they be up to?
Yeah, our black bear population in the state is doing quite well. So black bears, they're just constantly looking for food. And, I'm not sure that particular bear, if that's part of its route, but it may be looking to find different food source. And hopefully that food source that it's looking for or finding is a natural food source, meaning it's, acorns or berries or vegetation, and it's not human trash or bird seed, which is a big problem. So bears will remember where they get their food, and they kind of have a route that they do daily or weekly, and checking out all their spots of where they can find food. And so, potentially that beach area is an area where it may be, looking for food or walking through to find another area.
I had a question for you, Lindsay. Thanks for that. I've definitely been seeing more black bears, but my question is about turtles. I've come across numerous turtles, crossing the road, and I always, stop and like, oh, I should move this turtle. But now I'm wondering, is that the right thing to do? I mean, of course, I'm being careful that I'm not going to get run over, but what should I do when I see a turtle crossing the road?
Well, if it's safe for you to stop and pull over and go into the road, you can help a turtle along. But so a couple of things. One, it's most likely looking for a place to nest. It's probably a female, or possibly it has just completed its nesting and it's getting back into the wetland. So you want to move it off of the road surface, but in the direction that it was going. Don't take it back. If you see it move like going across the road away from a wetland, don't bring it back to the wetland. It may have been crossing the road to find that sandy spot to lay eggs. The other thing is, very carefully to handle them. I always have a pair of gloves in the back of my car, but maybe that's just me because I am a wildlife biologist.
I'll put some in.
If it's a snapping turtle, you might, they have sharp claws for sure. And don't drag the turtle by its tail. If you can lift it up on its side, or some people, if you happen to have like a shovel in the back of your car, you can help like scoot it across. And that's the best thing for it. And that prevents it from getting run over. So, thank you for saving a turtle if you can.
Well, thank you for that. Because I was always like, I'm always told, don't touch the wildlife. But I'm like, but but maybe I should in this case. So, but I think I'll throw in a pair of gloves in the car.
Yeah, if it's safe for you to do so, then yeah, by all means, you can help it along.
I have another question that I've just always wondered, and maybe have some insight on this. Rabbits, I've every once in a while, just the other week, I saw a rabbit and I was like, oh my God, I saw a rabbit. I never see rabbits. So,
yeah, so we have 3 species of rabbits, well, 2 rabbits and a hare in New Hampshire. So there's snowshoe hare, and they change color in the winter months. They turn white, and then in the summer months, they are browner gray color.
okay.
And then we also have Eastern cottontails and a New England cottontail. And Eastern cottontails and New England cottontails look really similar. The New England cottontail is rare, so it's most likely you're not seeing a New England cottontail. They're only found in the
Okay.
southeast along the seacoast. Eastern cottontails, they are the bunny that you would find in the suburban lawn, nibbling on clover. And they even nest like right in the grass area there. So that may be the one that you see. Smaller snowshoe hare have those big longer legs, and they're more in a wooded environment versus the Eastern cottontails. You would find it in like suburbia, even getting closer into more towns and city areas.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thanks. Soren, any other questions pop up?
We have one more question. That is, what are the signs of a loon in distress?
Sure. Yeah. And so it depends a little bit on the context. And so, behind Lindsay, there's a great shot of that loon swimming, and you can see that its head is up. And so if you're approaching a loon on the nest and it changes from that head up position to crane its head down, kind of like almost like it's hung over that nest, that's a sign that you're in that bird's personal space, and the next step for that loon, if you don't back off away from that nest, is to flush off of that nest. And again, leaving those eggs exposed, perhaps kicking the eggs into the water as it makes a hasty exit off of the nest. If you're in a canoe or a kayak and paddling up a little bit closer to a loon family, anytime they give a vocalization, it's a good sign, that they're distressed. If they move away from you, it's because, again, you're kind of in their personal distance and they want to leave or put a little bit more space in between you. So at that point, I would say don't follow them, right? I always, say if you want to get a good look at a pair of loons, there's one good way to do that, and that's with a pair of binoculars, right? And if you want to get a good picture of a loon, one way to do that, and that's with a nice telephoto lens. So you really don't want to, crowd in on these birds. And otherwise, loons will come ashore really only for 2 reasons. One is to mate, and the other is to incubate eggs. And so if you see a loon up on the shore, out of the water, and it's not doing one of those 2 things, there's a good chance that there's some distress happening in that bird, whether that's an injury or a sickness. And at that point, it's probably, it would be a good idea to give the Loon Preservation Committee a call. Again, I direct folks to our website, loon.org, because we have a section, learn to read signs, and that talks about signs of distress as in response to humans getting too close to loons. And it also shows kind of those typical loon behaviors as opposed to a distressed loon as well. So it's hopefully that's a good resource for people to.
Great, thank you so much. I think those are all the questions we had.
All right. Well, we have nearly impeccable timing here. It's just about 8 o'clock. So I wanted to thank everyone for being here and wanted to give our presenters a last chance. Lindsay and Harry, is there anything you wanted to add or share with our audience today? Lindsay?
No, just get outside and explore nature, look at wildlife. It's wonderful. It's a great way to connect and relax.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just echo what Lindsay said. Go out there and have wonderful experiences with loons. Remember to give them the space that they need, because that's when you're watching these birds as, doing their thing in their environment and not reacting to us, which is never, what we want. And in fact, Lindsay, one of your predecessors, Judy Silverberg at New Hampshire Fish and Game, said it the best that I've ever heard anyone say it. She just said, anytime that you have caused a wild animal to change its behavior, you've had an impact on that animal. And so those are the types of things that we want to avoid. And so, enjoy responsibly, enjoy it safely, And Andrea, I just would like to say thanks for the invitation, and thank you for putting this series on. This is wonderful, and I really like to see the other speakers that are coming up as well. So it's great that you're doing this. Thank you.
Well, we couldn't do it without experts like you, sharing your time and expertise with us. So thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Harry. Again, I've learned a ton. I know others have as well. Thank you, Soren, for being our friendly moderator this evening. So all of you will get an email tomorrow with an evaluation. You'll also get an email with links to the recording. And we have several additional webinars coming up this summer. So feel free, I hope to see you there. In the meantime, get out, enjoy our lakes, be safe, watch our wonderful wildlife from a distance, and hope to see you in 2 weeks from now. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.